There's an old saying among the locals in the Appalachian Mountains. If you hear your name being called in the woods at night, no, you didn't. People from the city treat the deep woods like a playground. We rent aesthetic cabins, take photos for social media, and ignore the fact that we are miles away from the nearest cell tower. We forget that the woods were there long before us. And some things in those woods have never left. Welcome to Pallwick. Turn off the lights, put your headphones on, and whatever you do, don't look at your window. Last November, I needed to get away from the burnout of my corporate job in Chicago. I found a listing online for a remote cabin in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. The listing had no reviews, but the pictures were gorgeous, and the price was unbelievably low. The owner, a guy named Thomas, only had one requirement listed in the description: must be willing to follow the house rules. I arrived just as the sun was setting. The nearest town was a 40-minute drive behind me. The silence out there wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, almost suffocating. When I walked inside, the cabin was exactly as pictured, but sitting dead center on the wooden kitchen island was a piece of yellow lined notepad paper. It wasn't a standard welcome note with the Wi-Fi password. It was a handwritten list of rules. Rule 1, lock all doors and draw the blinds exactly at 8 p.m. Do not look outside until morning. Rule 2, if you hear a woman crying on the porch, do not open the door. She is not hurt. Rule 3, if the motion sensor light in the driveway turns on, do not check the window. Ignore it. I laughed it off. I figured Thomas had a weird sense of humor, trying to give his guests a spooky, rustic experience. I threw the note in the trash, unpacked my bags, and opened a beer. By 9:30 p.m., I was sitting on the couch watching a downloaded movie on my laptop. I hadn't closed the blinds. The large living room window looked out directly into the tree line. Right around 10 p.m., the motion sensor floodlight outside snapped on. It illuminated the dirt driveway and the edge of the woods. I glanced over, annoyed, assuming it was a stray raccoon or a deer. But there was nothing there, just empty dirt. I went back to my movie. 10 minutes later, the light snapped off. Then, a second later, it snapped back on. This time, my eyes were drawn to the tree line. Standing just at the edge of the light's reach, partially obscured by a massive oak tree, was a figure. It was too tall to be a bear, and far too thin. It looked like a person, wearing something pale and ragged, but its proportions were entirely wrong. Its arms hung down past its knees. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, terrified that if I moved, it would notice me looking. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from my mom. The screen lit up the dark room. When I looked back at the window, the figure was gone, but the floodlight was still on. I practically crawled across the floor, reached up, and yanked the blinds shut. I locked the front door, checked the back door, and sat in the dark living room with a kitchen knife until the sun came up. I told myself I would leave in the morning, but by daylight, everything felt so normal. I convinced myself I was just exhausted and seeing tree branches playing tricks in the light. I decided to stay one more night. It was the worst mistake of my life. On the second night, I didn't take any chances. By 7:30 p.m., every blind was drawn and the deadbolts were thrown. I went to the bedroom, locked that door too, and put my headphones in to drown out the oppressive silence of the woods. Around 2 a.m., I woke up abruptly. The power was out. The hum of the refrigerator was gone, leaving the cabin in absolute dead silence. Then I heard it, coming from the front porch, just on the other side of the heavy oak door. It was a voice. "David, open the door. Please, David, I'm freezing." My blood turned to ice. It was my girlfriend's voice, Sarah. But Sarah was 500 miles away in Chicago. She didn't even know the exact address of this cabin. "David, let me in. My car broke down, please." The voice was perfect. The pitch, the tone, the slight crack in her voice when she was upset. It was exactly her. But something was off about the cadence. It sounded like a recording being played back. The emotion was totally flat. I backed into the corner of the bedroom, clutching my car keys. Then the voice changed. It wasn't Sarah anymore. It was my own voice. "David, open the door. Please, David. I'm freezing." Something was mimicking what it had just said, but using my vocal cords. Then, the heavy front door began to rattle. Someone, or something, was violently twisting the doorknob. The wood groaned under the pressure. It wasn't trying to pick the lock. It was trying to force the door off its hinges with sheer, brute strength. "David," my own voice mocked from outside, accompanied by a wet, gargling laugh. "Check the window, David." I didn't think. Instinct took over. I shoved the bedroom window open, slicing my hand on the screen, and tumbled out into the freezing mud of the backyard. I didn't have my shoes. I sprinted toward the driveway, expecting at any moment to feel long, pale fingers wrap around my neck. I reached my car, unlocked it, and threw myself inside. As the headlights clicked on, they swept across the front porch of the cabin. The door was completely scratched up, deep gouges in the thick wood. But there was nothing on the porch. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it down the dirt road. I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. I drove for 45 minutes straight until I hit the interstate and pulled into a brightly lit 24-hour gas station. Only then did I realize I was hyperventilating. The next morning, I called the local police to escort me back to get my belongings. When we arrived, the front door of the cabin was standing wide open. My bags were exactly where I left them. But sitting dead center on the kitchen island, right next to the yellow notepad of rules, was my kitchen knife, the one I'd been holding the night before. The police told me it was probably a drifter, a squatter who lived in the deep woods and liked to mess with tourists. But drifters don't sound like the people you love. Drifters don't stand in the freezing cold, 7 feet tall, staring through your window. There are things in the deep American wilderness that we aren't meant to understand. If you find a list of rules, follow them. Thank you for visiting Pallwick. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more ultra-realistic horror. And remember, keep your blinds closed tonight.